Shawn Rhoden's been charged with rape. Can steroids lead to rape? This is the biggest news in bodybuilding history, probably, actually, that a man has been charged with rape, and within 24 hours, the Mr. Olympia contest owners have said he's not competing this year and he's never going to compete. And this is just when he's charged. So I have to chime in on this. As the Anabolic Doc, taking care of men for over 10 years that are on steroids and testosterone, I know a lot about how testosterone and steroids affects a man's sexual behavior. Is testosterone going to be on trial and steroids with Mr. Rhoden? Absolutely. The attorneys, the prosecutors, they're absolutely going to bring up his steroid use, without doubt. So, I've done my research on this, and I have data, I have evidence-based data that I'd like to bring to you and to present today. And then, of course, beyond that, I want to talk about the anecdotal information and the history of what I know about men that are using testosterone and steroids on their sexual behavior. Right off the bat, we have to talk about the evidence. And there's a lot of evidence, but there's really no conclusive evidence on this. And this reminds me of roid rage. And I'll talk about that and how I compare these in the end. So the data is Psychosomatic Medicine from 1976. Plasma testosterone levels in the rapist. This is incredible. They evaluated 52 rapists and 12 child molesters, and they also evaluated their level of aggression and violence and anger. And it turns out that all of these convicted rapists and child molesters had testosterone levels that were in the normal range, so no super physiologic levels. But they found the rapists who were judged to be the most violent had significantly higher levels of testosterone. And this was compared to normal men, child molesters, and other rapists in the study. Now, there are other studies with incarcerated men that show, compared to men that are not incarcerated, they have higher levels of testosterone. Again, the data for this is not the best data. It's different types of data. None of this is randomized and double-blinded. And in many constraints, it really can't even be done that way. So we have to understand the data, always understand the data. We have to base our decisions scientifically on data. Then we're going to talk about the anecdotes and common sense. The next article that I found is one from a journal called Sexual Abuse. And the title of this one is, Do Sex Offenders Have Higher Levels of Testosterone? Results from a meta-analysis. And this is presented between 2017 and 2018, so it's recent. And essentially, this is looking across the board at a lot of data, and they're extrapolating data out of it and trying to make sense of it. That's what a meta-analysis is. So the bottom line on this was that there was no difference in testosterone levels with sexual offenders. And they found that of the groups, child molesters actually had lower levels. So that's the data. Now, what I want to present to you today is how serious this is. Obviously, men rape much more than women do. This is common sense. Obviously, it's supported by data. Men are men. Men are men mainly because of testosterone. Everyone knows this. I'd like to discuss and compare and contrast three groups of men. Men that have higher levels of normal testosterone, men on testosterone replacement, and men on steroids. Now, the men that have higher levels of testosterone, I've done a lot of research on this, are called higher T males. And unfortunately, again, there's no conclusive data. There has been a lot of politicization on men with higher testosterone levels. Now, these are natural males. And unfortunately, it stems from the Me Too movement. And the truth is, no one is going to give support to aggressive men and men that rape women and do these things. That's ridiculous. But let's look at it. Unfortunately, in the literature, that's just anecdotal literature and opinion literature. They talk about higher sex drive, higher success levels, aggression, football players. And then they lead into talking about heinous people like Weinstein, Franken, O'Reilly, Rose. These are people that are in the media that they're lumping this into with the Me Too movement. And they somehow relate that they have higher testosterone levels, and associated are some positive behaviors of why they're so successful and aggressive and competitive. And then they stream into and they blur the line into the sexual offenses against women. That's very interesting to me, and there's no data to support that. Matter of fact, I think most of these guys, they're not on testosterone, definitely not on steroids. They're just deviants. They're bombastic, narcissistic, bad people. Now, let's move away from men on higher testosterone levels, because that's actually a group considered. The next are going to be two groups: men on testosterone replacement and men on steroids. Obviously, what's the difference? Testosterone levels, upper limit normal, that's testosterone, TRT. Normal to upper limit normal. Now, going over the line, super physiologically, we go into steroids. And we're talking about the esters of testosterone. We're also talking about a host of other anabolic androgenic steroids that we know. And Tren is a very important steroid. You should see my video on Tren. Now, the only way to discuss this and to look at men that are on testosterone and are they deviant in sexual behavior is to look at aspects that relate to emotional states. And I want to compare and contrast roid rage versus hypersexual behavior in this presentation. So, there's no data to support that men on testosterone or anabolic steroids have roid rage. But it is true that men that are on testosterone, and definitely some types of steroids, have hypersexual behavior. That's actually why men actually like steroids and being on testosterone. It's common sense. Now, what are we talking about here? And what's the line blurred between a man that's aggressive and feels great and is competitive and who has a great libido and is crossing the line and deviant and dangerous? It is impulse control. Impulse control is what it is, and the data on roid rage certainly supports this. Now, there's really no data conclusive on roid rage, but I know a lot about it. So I'm going to chime in on what I've learned anecdotally from taking care of thousands of patients on testosterone and steroids. Roid rage. What does everyone say? Doc, roid rage isn't true. You know it's an asshole, and then it's an asshole on steroids. And you know what? It's true. These are men that have underlying personality traits, that they're aggressive, they can be very narcissistic, and they have personality disorders. Not to mention, there's some normal variants in there. And then you put that man on testosterone, not to mention Tren, other anabolic steroids, and what happens? They're aggressive, they're competitive, they can become dangerous. But is it roid rage, or is that just a man that's that way anyway, but is he going over the line? That's what it comes down to. No one's going to disagree. There are men that are super aggressive, commit crimes, and that are heinous men that are not on steroids. And we're not going to talk about are their levels that much higher normally, naturally. It's not going to be discussed, and it's not going to be proven in any data. And what are we going to do about it anyway? In the end, I'll give my take. So, men that have personality issues and that are snappy, men that have inherent short fuses, when they go on testosterone only, not to mention steroids, they can feel that they are embarrassed for their behavior, or they're scared for their behavior, and they don't want to be on steroids and testosterone anymore because they're hurting their loved ones, not to mention road rage. So, now, moving over to the other side, testosterone and steroids on hypersexual behavior. What do we know? Testosterone given to men, even that have normal testosterone levels, are hypersexual. And this is something that typically is thought of to be good, right? So you're a man that's tired, you're middle-aged, maybe you're getting older, and you have low T, low normal T, you take testosterone, and you're pretty quickly noticing that you're thinking more about sex and you're more sexually active, waking up with early morning erections more, and the sexual experience is better. Now, pushing over to deviant sexual behavior versus the roid rage, again, impulse control. But when you're looking at hypersexual behavior and deviant sexual behavior, you have to tease that away from aggressive behavior that a man could realize, I'm feeling aggressive, I'm short-fused, bite it. Now, when it comes to a man that is hypersexual and he's going to cross that line and attack and push himself on another woman or, God forbid, a child, this is so deviant. It's so disgusting that men that are on testosterone realize, they feel that sometimes that they have obsessive, intrusive thoughts of sex and they're uncomfortable. Some men, a small percent of men on testosterone, will tell me that, doctor, I'm uncomfortable with my sexuality. I'm finding myself to be obsessed, or that my sexual thoughts and my actions are leading to scenarios where I may be putting someone I love into a compromised position, if not worse. I've seen this. And this is why men that have impulse control and that are normal men, which is the vast majority of men in the world, regardless of testosterone or steroids, realize, don't do it. Do not push over the edge, even though your brain is telling you something. There's control of not to do it. But it is true. I have men that stop taking testosterone because they're suffering with impulse control and they're uncomfortable because they might have even done some things to someone sexually that they look at themselves and they're embarrassed and disgusted. With all this said, so many men are on testosterone and more to come, because it's a beautiful thing. It can be so great to be on androgens and to feel well as a man, to be confident, powerful, to be sexual and satisfied. But there's that edge, impulse control, it's always going to be, and it's definitely going to come back to the underlying person. It is going to come back, and the literature supports it. I've read in depth that regardless of the testosterone levels, it's going to come down to the person. Across humanity, we are good people inherently. There are always deviations, and we have to be aware of this. We need to understand that if men are going to use testosterone, not to mention steroids, we have to be aware of the bad side effects. And deviant sexual behavior can definitely be a bad side effect, but it's understood that most men, the vast majority of men, will be able to control that, and it actually won't happen. They're going to enjoy their sexuality. We need more studies on this. We need more open discussion among health professionals and people about testosterone and anabolic steroids. Thank you so much. I hope this helps. Dr. Thomas O'Connor here. I'm glad you made it to the end of the video. If you liked it, hit the like button and please subscribe to our channel. And I look forward to bringing you more cool and interesting videos just like this in the future. Stay strong and healthy.